Well, dobre wiecie, Pete. Josie, Jasliv, and Yutia.
Dobre noche, big fella. Dobre noche.
And I think I said I'm happy to be back. Pleased to be back. It's been a little while since we've been on air. I hope I didn't swear just sending anybody in Russian, but had a great time in Russia. Great country, great people. But very pleased to be back home and on the air again.
Beats me why they let you out.
I know. Mate, we've got a great show lined up tonight. We've got we're very privileged to be joined by a couple of payroll gurus. We're joined by, of course, Tracy Angwin. Good evening, Trace, from the Australian Payroll Association.
Hi there.
And also joining us tonight as our special guest, we have Sonya Farawell from Group 314. Good evening, Sonya, and thank you for joining us also. Are you unmuted, Sonya?
Oh, who knows?
There you go. We are now. Good
All
to
good.
go. Yep. Thanks for joining us. All right. Well, both our guests are highly experienced in the payroll space, and I couldn't think of two more qualified people to talk to us tonight, Pete, in regards to payroll.
I could not.
As well as being put forward, or to put forward an RTO perspective, our two special guests, of course, are unique in their terms of their payroll perspectives. Tracy providing support, qualifications and educational material to the greater payroll profession through, of course, the Australian Payroll Association. And Sonya being the Principal Financial Services Educator at Group 314 and a very strong advocate for the payroll profession and, of course, Director of Australian Bookkeepers Association. Jeez. Tracy, you just want to tell us a little bit about what Australian Payroll Association does?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks very much. Well, as you said, we provide advisory, training, qualifications, specialist consulting to the payroll industry. So, many employers that do their own payroll and also, third-party folk that do payroll on behalf of employers, like accountants and bookkeepers. Essentially, we just provide all the advice that someone needs to run a compliant payroll.
All right, terrific. And Sonya, Group 314 has been around for some time. Can you share with listeners who may not have seen you about somewhere, but I know you get a high presence at a lot of functions, but tell us a little about Group 314.
Yeah, Katie, we started in about 2009 and we're a small boutique RTO that really likes to work with our students and do it well. So we do specialise in education purely from a financial services perspective to the bookkeeping industry. We don't go sort of and stretch out into other areas like financial planning, etc. We maintain a small, distinct focus and aim to do that really well.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. Now, ladies, before we start talking payroll, you may or may not be aware, but our resident Camel expert, Pete Thorp, always shares with us a Camel tip before the start of each episode. So, mate, what have you got in store for us this week?
Mate, I do, in fact, have a Camel fact. It's quite useful. Do we know, well, traditionally Wednesday is known as Hump Day. And in keeping with Hump Day, I've got a few Camel Hump facts for you. There are basically two types of camels. We may have touched on this before. There's a dromedary camel. It is the camel with one hump. And there's the Bactrian camel, which is the one with two humps. Bactrians come from Asia and dromedaries come from the Arabic countries. So that's interesting in itself. The camel hump is a store of fat where he fills it up when he's getting plenty of food and he drains it out when he's under stress. Other useful uses for the camel hump is is if you're riding along the beach on a camel at, say, at Cable Beach at Broome, you need a saddle. You've got to put the saddle on something, so that's useful. Or if you're on the back of a camel and you're tired, you can always rest your head on the camel's hump as a pillow.
As a pillow.
So there you go. There's some useful camel hump facts for Hump Day.
I have missed the camel facts, I must admit.
No, mate, it's you do share that with the Russians?
No, they would have locked me up for sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, you know the drill as far as getting involved tonight. We'd love to hear some feedback from our listeners, comments, questions to our special guests. So you'll get an opportunity to do that later in the show. So if you hear something along the way and you'd like to ask our special guests about it, then just type that into the Q&A box on your screen. And we will filter through those and obviously get through as many questions as we can along the way. All right. Let's get into it.
All right. Well, we all know that payroll is an increasingly complex area. Significant changes from the regulators over the last little bit, changes to all manner of leave, awards, super guarantee, now single touch payroll over the top doesn't seem to end. And combine that with the fact that what we're seeing with regulators at the moment is they seem to be taking a stronger line with enforcement. We've seen some pretty high-profile prosecutions, and even one, again, I think I saw this morning, which was quite spectacular. And also, we sort of, even the tax department had their own with Plutus Payroll. That's not really sponsored by the tax office, but they're close. But having said that, bookkeepers are experiencing an ever-increasing demand from clients, probably driven by the aforementioned complications. And you're seeing from your survey, big fellow, that over 90% of our bookkeepers are doing payroll. Yep. So the participation rate is very high. And even it's also it's an increasing percentage of their revenue at the moment. So the last couple of years have borne that out, that they're being more are doing it, and more it's forming a greater percentage of their income. So it's quite a logical line for bookkeepers to pursue. Can be quite financially lucrative, and as a pure marketing service, it's a great way to attract clients, and it's a great way to strengthen existing relationships with clients. So it is a logical fit for bookkeeping, in my humble view. But with payroll, there is very little room for error. It's one of those things, unlike BAS, where you can often fix up mistakes. If you get payroll wrong, someone loses. Either the employee loses or the employer loses. So get it wrong, and someone is likely to suffer financial loss. You could actually be sued in some cases for some of that financial loss. So it's an area where it is quite important to get it right. And if you get it very, very wrong, the regulators may take an interest, the tax board may jump on it, and they could question your registration in extreme cases. It's conceivable under Code of Conduct items. And Fair Work could look at accessorial liability under Section 550 if they feel that the intermediary is actually complicit in a client's wrongdoing. Extreme examples, but it is a space where it is possible. So perhaps it really is time for us to have a bit of a look at these new payroll qualifications. So they could be right on the mark and extremely good timing. So just before we get stuck in the qualifications, it is worth remembering, for BAS agents in particular, that is a code of conduct item that is called competency. And it basically says that you can only do that sort of work that you're competent to do. Bit of a generalisation, but essentially, if you charged off in the payroll space not having a clue and get it violently wrong, you probably you've breached the code of conduct items. So it more or less says you should only do what you're capable of doing. Pretty logical. So let's get stuck into the payroll qualifications themselves. There's been two new payroll programs that have been introduced, and they both have got support in certain levels from the tax practitioner board. Now, I'm going to loosely call them qualifications, and Sonya rightly pointed out to me that only one of them is really a qualification, but I'll use the word qualification as a collective. Sort of like a murder of crows and a charm of magpies. This is a group of qualifications. So we've got a diploma of payroll services, which is FNS, some letters and numbers and stuff. And there's a payroll administrator skill set, which is FNS, more numbers and letters. The diploma is a formal nationally accredited qualification, whereas the skill set is really essentially a program. It may result in a certificate of attainment, but we'll call them both qualifications from here on down. As I understand it, the payroll skill set, and I'll get jumped on here by Tracy or Sonya if I get it wrong, the payroll skill set is a subset of the diploma. The diploma comprises 11 units, 8 compulsory core ones and 3 electives, and 5 of the 8 compulsory components comprise the skill set. And they're pretty useful, from what I can see, they're pretty useful subject matter. You've got important issues that doing payroll you come across, such as salary packaging, super, terminations, industrial regulations and laws, and taxation systems. So they're part and soul payroll issues. So they're a pretty key component of it. So just to take it back to Tracy, if I could. Tracy, you were part of the formal process that saw these qualifications being built and come to bear. Can you just take us through the process of how we came to have these new programs at our disposal?
Sure. So there's always, when ASK was putting together or approving any new qualifications, there has to have been a consultation process with industry. So that's what I was part of. The qualification, the Diploma of Payroll Services, is very specifically written or developed for those doing payroll on behalf of employers. So any outsourced provider, whether that be an outsourced company, bookkeepers, or accountants, in fact. And that's why it's quite distinct about being payroll services. Certainly my part of the industry consultation was around what feedback we get from bookkeepers as to the things that they ask us that they're unsure of in terms of the payroll process, and essentially they're the things that you said, those five units. And those 5 units are brand new units, so they have to be written by any RTO that's going to provide this. It's not one you can just pull off the shelf or buy the content for at this point. And they're very, very specific to payroll. So I think done well, it's a really good skill set. Brilliant.
Hey, Sonya, do you have any observations about the particular relevance of the material covered by the programs? In particular, how it affects bookkeepers?
Yeah, look, Pete, I think if you had to pick 5 topics for payroll, then they've done them. You know, the topics that have been chosen are quite relevant. They're very relevant. One of the things they've missed in the skill set, I think, is actually fundamentals of payroll. Mm-hmm. Because they go straight into, the skill set covers really complex areas: salary packaging, superannuation, terminations, industrial regulation, and taxation systems. So what about we need to look at the fundamentals. And I guess those that are going to undertake a diploma may very well have those foundation skills already, but I guess it's a bit of an assumption. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of those types of lower level skills embedded in the skill set. But overall, I'm really quite happy with the content. And of course, we're going through our process at the moment of developing this skill set and, in fact, the whole diploma. And we as an RTO have the right to obviously write and deliver material above what the criteria is. And we will do so. If I see that it's a little bit lacking in areas, we'll certainly put more information in than is required. And I think that is the key to delivering this particular diploma and the skill set well.
Beauty. And Trace, did you have any view on the contents of maybe skill set and diploma insofar as they affect, contract payroll people, bookkeepers in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the assumption is, and I absolutely take Sonya's point, the assumption is this diploma is not for someone who doesn't understand payroll. So the assumption is that they will have already, essentially they're most likely already a BAS agent or a tax agent, which means they've done at least, in a BAS agent's case, one unit of payroll, and they're probably processing payroll at the moment. It's for those who are processing payroll, which I think you said is 90% of bookkeepers surveyed, who actually are not confident in their competence. So oftentimes, what the feedback we're getting from bookkeepers is clients will ask you to do payroll, and they'll just say, well, isn't that just part of what you do? And it's very hard not to take on the payroll, and yet sometimes you might not have you won't feel confident that you can do that. And bookkeeping is particularly difficult because you need to be across multiple awards, which is why we made sure we included an industrial regulations unit. It's actually the area of payroll that both outsourced payroll and actually in-house payroll that gets wrong most often. When we do payroll audits, we rarely find that there's a tax problem. It's almost always an industrial regulations problem. Every single one of the things that you'll see in the press recently, we've had Lush, we had Rebel Sport come out yesterday, where there are errors in payroll, underpayments of millions of dollars. They are all industrial relations issues. There's no sort of basic payroll errors. There's no taxation errors. It's all calculating awards and understanding where to find things and how to interpret those.
Yeah, that's pretty relevant. Kelvin, you came out the other day too, didn't you, with something?
Did I?
Well, Tracy was talking about Rebel coming out, so I thought maybe it might be an opportunity for you. But anyway, if you don't want to take the lead, that's okay.
The closet's another
Question for Sonya around skill sets. Why would someone produce a skill set? What's a skill set? What's its function? Why is it not a qualification? What is a skill set?
Pete, the skill set's a subset of the diploma, and it's basically to address a particular set of skills that's missing in industry, which would have been defined as part of that consultation process that Tracy referenced.
So given that Tax Board in particular were a part of the process, is it reading between the lines, or would we thinking that they would see that there's a gap out there with practitioners or a potential gap out there, and they've aimed it fairly and squarely at tax and BAS practitioners?
Look, I believe so. Yeah. I think it's all well and good that the Cert 4 in bookkeeping or accounting has one unit of payroll, but as we all know, that's really not sufficient. So I think it's been, the skill set is well designed and well aimed at BAS agents, and all of us as practicing BAS agents and even tax agents should be looking at least doing the skill set, if not the full diploma.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully the board will put some kind of policy in place where particularly the skill set is compulsory CPE, because one that's dealing with payroll is working in a very ever-changing, very complex, litigious area, and we constantly need to be educating ourselves and updating our skills.
You know what? That's a really good question, and I reckon we can ask the Tax Board directly, because next Bookkeeper Radio, we're going to be talking about CPE, and we've got Ian Taylor from the Tax Practitioner Board, who'll be along, and we can ask you that question directly. How about that?
Awesome.
Yes. I've got a funny feeling he might be online now, so don't be unkind or anything. Look, let's just have a look at where the Tax Practitioner Board's use of these new qualifications, because they were integral to the process, so they must have some ideas and uses. So from what we can see, their immediate use, we can see twofold. One is there's a class of people out there that Tracy interfaces with occasionally, and they call them outsourced payroll providers. These are people that are out there doing payroll who aren't necessarily tax agents or BAS agents as their core activity. These are people that just do payroll pretty well. And the board had pronounced that these people should be registered, and the difficulty had always been that there was no qualification out there, or formal qualification other than yours, Tracy, that really fitted the model. Like you could go and do a BAS agent certificate for and BAS agent work, and it didn't really, we had one payroll unit, so that didn't really help. So the people that were doing this weren't necessarily going and seeking the qualification that would actually get the registration. So I think the board picked up on the fact that there was some sort of a gap, or a perceived gap, and part of it is to plug that. So I suspect, well, I think they've already come out at some people coming out, but they've already come out and said that that these outsourced payroll people will, if they do the diploma, be able to become registered as a BAS agent and have a qualified BAS agent registration that allows them to do payroll, which you'd call a payroll, I think it's called a payroll service provider. So that's use one, and that's for the diploma itself. They've said it's under their regulations that it's at least a certificate for, and for that they'll register them as a BAS agent and allow them to do payroll. And that means that they're in out of the cold and they can stop doing this stuff illegally. That's if they're doing it illegally, not that they would be. And the other use is of those of the units, particularly the skill set and units out of the diploma, that can be done as electives as part of the certificate for in bookkeeping. And I think that's smart, because that's an encouragement for someone who's coming into BAS agent space to have more payroll training than just the one unit, as Tracy says. So it's a logical way that if you're going to bolster your Cert 4 and make it more relevant on the way in, that you do some payroll units. So again, another good use for it. But it's important right here, right now, to note that for a BAS agent, there is no compulsion to go near any of this stuff. There's no regulation, no licensing requirement that says you must do any of this. For a BAS agent, it is entirely at your option, unless you are one of these payroll outsource providers who are going to register as a payroll service provider. Trace, this qualification, and just looking at that class of people called payroll service providers, and I think you and I know there's a few of them out there, do you see a steady stream of registrations coming from this group, given, I guess, that if they don't have the qualification now, brand new, they couldn't have, it's going to take them a period of time? Are you expecting to see numbers, and will it be quickly or slowly?
So I've been keeping an eye on the chat box, Peter, and I'm aware that Ian Taylor is on the line. Hi, Ian.
Hello, Ian. Did you swear earlier?
It wasn't me.
I think you both behaved yourself.
Oh, good. You didn't come out, which was good, because you got to stay a fit and proper person.
The reality is that payroll outsourcing companies, so we're talking, the companies that their sole purpose is to provide outsourcing services to the industry, they don't really value, in general, this is a big generalisation, there are hundreds of them, everything from the big multinationals right to the mum and dads, doing it from sort of home or a small office. The reality is, for the majority of those, don't really value the payroll qualifications. It's not actually part of what they see as what they deliver. They deliver a labour arbitrage. They're not providing advisory, so they don't really value. I mean, I've been talking to all the major payroll providers that are not registered with the Tax Practitioners Board for about 5 years, and none of them are compelled to register. What has changed, of course, and there was a great meeting in Melbourne at the tax office a few months ago before Single Touch Payroll. This has changed things. Single Touch Payroll has changed, because what's happened now is you have to actually lodge a Single Touch Payroll file on behalf of another employer. You need to have login details, so that's tax agent login details to the ATO portal, which will actually compel any unregistered organisations to be registered with the board. Now, the issue is, the ones that I've spoken to, they're all large. They're not all. Most of them are large companies, and most of them will have someone with a Cert 4 in accounting or a Cert 4 in bookkeeping already. So that's what they will actually use. It's unlikely that they will have any more will to actually upskill their staff in payroll qualifications or the skill set than they did prior to it happening. And at the end of the day, they're not providing that sort of very focused one-on-one type of style service that bookkeepers do. So whilst that's not great news, and Ian's probably not really thanking me for delivering that, the great news for bookkeepers is there's a huge opportunity to actually deliver really good payroll outsourcing services to your clients with a high level of service, that clients will be happy to pay for, and feel very comfortable that you have additional either skill set or qualifications in payroll.
Yeah, I can hear Ian saying, but they should be doing this qualification, because they also do have a code obligation to make sure they got sufficient numbers of registered people to supervise the work. So if you're a big enough organisation, you probably aren't going to get by with one token tax agent and be able to justify your registration. So if they're going to push someone into more qualifications, will they push them towards this one, or will they say go and find a Cert 4?
Yeah, there's lots of
Could be some. You don't see a rush, but
no, look, there's not at all. There's very much a and they won't say this publicly, and I'm certainly not going to dump anyone in it, but there's not an appetite for it from the larger organisations. A lot of them even offshore their operations. So they would argue perhaps that they don't need. Look, I don't agree with it at all. I think everyone who touches payroll needs to have some form of either qualification or at least either our Cert 4 in payroll administration, which is, as what Sonya referred to earlier, sort of the more fundamental level payroll qualification, or at least the skill set from this new diploma.
It might be one of those cases where the greater number of people doing this might be those that want to do it rather than those that have to do it, because there sort of seems to be a way around having to do it. Probably another, while I've got you, while you're on a roll, we look at an understanding what the tax departments, they've gone to a lot of, the TPB have gone to a lot of trouble to get this right, and I think initial sense is that the qualifications are quite good. And compelling an outsourced provider, if they're coming in as a new registration, to go that way, terrific. Why, you got any view on why they wouldn't also have a similar sort of qualification requirement of a new BAS agent and a new tax agent who they are going to license to go and do payroll?
Well, I'm not across the workings of the TPB, but to be honest, as I said, I think if you do payroll, you should absolutely have some form of qualification or skill set.
Yeah.
And you said that 90% of bookkeepers do it. So if I was a regulator, I would think really carefully about the fact that very few have this extension of whatever the payroll units might be in the qualification they already have, because there's an awful lot of employers, a lot of small business employers, that are having their payroll done by bookkeepers.
Yeah.
We know that the regulators, Fair Work in particular, are really going after small business. So it just protects everyone if we know that the people that are processing small business payroll know what they're doing.
Yeah. Kelvin nudged me under the table here. I apparently exaggerated with the 90%. It's actually 89.8%. I rounded up, and he sort of asked me to correct it, which I have. Just on that thought, Sonya, so we got a body. So we got a great qualification out there. You seem to be saying this is about as good as we've seen out there for someone in the payroll space that's recognised around the place. We've got outsourced providers coming in now. They've got to have it. Terrific. What about, you've got a view on the 15,000 BAS agents that are already registered and the 42,000 tax agents that can tear out and do payroll today? I'm one of those tax agents. I don't think I've got any payroll qualification at all. I've got no units in payroll. Any view other than I shouldn't do it because I'm maybe not competent? Do you think they should address this population?
Quite frankly, you've just terrified me.
he terrifies me too, Sonya.
Well, I mean, have you ever looked in my mirror in the morning? I terrify myself sometimes.
Yeah, look, I'm sure you've got other talents, but clearly payroll's not one of them. Look, I'm a little bit mystified, to be honest, because I think obviously there's a call in the industry, and we know there is, to have payroll qualifications on scope. I firmly believe BAS agents and tax agents should be gaining that education, whether it's in the full diploma or whether it's in the skill set. Why it is not compulsory or why it's not enforced by the regulators is beyond me. I personally will be undertaking the diploma myself. I'm going to start with the easy approach and do the skill set. And then tackle the diploma. But I really do believe strongly that everybody should be doing it. It's just, even if you touch payroll just in the slightest, you might only have a handful of clients who have one or two staff. Understanding awards and industrial agreements is a really complex area. Where do you learn that if you don't do it on a course? It's all well and good to read through the award, but your interpretation may not be right.
Yeah, I don't think we can accuse them of sitting on their hands on it because we discussed this and while I've stopped short of compelling it, they are, my understanding, the formal position will be to strongly encourage. They likely to even promote it as a qualifying CPE and saying that it is really, really worth doing. And I've just noticed there's a chat thing has appeared from me in here saying that it will be qualifying CPE. So they're going to come out quite clearly and say it is qualifying CPE. So there'll be an encouragement to do it. But I think the message is it's going to be entirely voluntary for those that are already registered. And in fact, any other new BAS agent, new tax agent, unless they're one of these selected outsourced providers. There will be some encouragement.
Pete, if you were, whether or not the regulator encourages it, doesn't encourage it, makes it compulsory, doesn't make it compulsory, the reality is, if I'm a BAS agent or a tax agent and I'm doing payroll, just Section 550, as you said earlier, accessorial liability, there has been prosecutions of an accounting firm of this. If you want to do your job well, you need the additional payroll training.
Yeah, unless there's that law out there, what do they call it? The law of bloody common sense or something. Why would you do it? Why would you risk your house to get it wrong? It's nuts. So I think it's just logical. Big fella, you've got a question.
All right. we've probably sort of spoken a little bit about the merits of the qualifications themselves, and obviously the need, whether it be voluntary, compulsory, etc., CPE, not CE. But maybe we can just start to unpack some of the qualifications a little further. Trace, I might start with you, and just in terms of timeframes, like bookkeepers are a very busy breed of people, so if there's no compulsion for them to do it, but we think that it's important that they do it for those very reasons that we just spoke about, give us a little bit of an indication of the time frame that it might take to sit through either the diploma or the skill set.
Well, the skill set's 5 units, but there'll be 5. I mean, certainly from our point of view, in terms of Australian Payroll Institute, they are 5 big units. There's a lot to learn. But it's really hard to say how long it takes, because it so depends on what your current knowledge is and how you are as a learner. But you should expect that it's about half a diploma. It should take about half as long, and again, the full diploma is 11 units. I'm not sure actually of the diploma's enrolment period. Our diploma is 16 months, and I would expect that to be about the same for the Diploma of Payroll Services.
Okay, great.
So if you're holding down a job or running a business as a bookkeeper, you'd like to think you could get it done in 8 or 9 months.
If you concentrated on it, for sure.
Yeah. Sonya, any alternate thought to that?
Yeah, look, I think Tracy's about on track with that. It very much depends on your current skill set, your the electives that you've chosen, any prior qualifications that the student may have completed. It could come down to their learning styles, their computer skills. It's really hard to put a time frame on how long it would take. There's also, many professional bookkeepers may have RPL opportunities there, which will streamline the process as well. So it's a little bit like how long is the piece of string? Yeah.
That's probably a good point. So if you are a bookkeeper who is considering completing either of these programs, the diploma or the skill set, what sort of approaches do you think you might take?
If it was me, the first thing I'd be asking the RTO or the provider is what RPL opportunities are on offer. I'd be looking at the elective choices. There's only 3 elective opportunities in the diploma. So, if you did really want to streamline your approach, the electives could be units that you've completed in your Diploma of Accounting, you Cert 4 in Bookkeeping, you Cert 4 in Accounting. So then that cuts down how many you would need to do. You could cut it down a little further, because the 8 core units, 2 of those are core in the Cert 4 Bookkeeping. So you could really, in theory, trim the diploma units down to, 6 units, which are the core and 1 other.
That's assuming you've got pre-existing qual. Yeah.
And I think it's really important to, when you're choosing a provider, to speak to them and find out if they're flexible with the elective unit content, and are they happy to work with you through an RPL process. Interestingly enough, all RTOs are supposed to provide an RPL process, but not all particularly like to go down that path. So,
okay.
And I guess if you're really looking to...
There are certainly streamlined approaches that you can take.
Yeah.
And that's not to cut through material or to cut out learning opportunities, etc. It's to recognise existing skills and knowledge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Each of you will have had a chance, I guess, to look at the individual units of competency contained within the programs. Can I just get your respective thoughts on the material that you sort of see in there, and how each of you might evolve that within your own programs? Trace, can I start with you?
So I've got the details here. I mean, particularly for the skill set, the 5 units, I'm not a fan of RPL for this one. I mean, as Sonya rightly says, all RTOs should have an RPL process, of which certainly our RTO does. But if you're doing the skill set, it's because you don't have confidence in your payroll knowledge. So I'd hate to see that being shortcut because and you'd miss out on learning opportunities. And but in terms of the actual elective units, look, a lot of them don't necessarily relate to payroll. If you were new to bookkeeping or tax agent, it could be quite useful, because there's things like manage budgets and financial plans, and manage risk, and things about complex spreadsheets and business tax requirements. That's all really good if you were new to the industry. I don't know how much of that's necessarily relevant to payroll knowledge, but I think it's fine. I mean, I just personally think that the actual payroll knowledge that we hear from when we pick up the phone and when bookkeepers call us with payroll questions, they're covered in the skill set. Those 5 units, they're the most important of the skills of the diploma units, and the rest is really up to you, depending on where you think you need further education.
Yep, great.
So is a reasonable approach for a BAS agent to say, okay, well, there is some great knowledge and learning here, is to attack the skill set first. Presumably, if you've done that and that covers most of it's a subset of the diploma, and you really want to go the next step and get the piece of paper, not that it's compulsory, that you can just extend on it. Is that one way of attacking it?
It depends on the RTO. You want to talk to the RTO, see how they go about it. They may have in certain RTOs that they could actually say, no, the diploma is in this order, and it could well be that those units are at the end. It's horses for courses. What we do at Australian Payroll Institute is all about payroll. So we are fairly unlikely to put the whole diploma on our scope. The skill set's already on our scope, but fairly unlikely to do the full diploma. I think if you want to do the full diploma, there's other organisations that you might do that with. Well, you could certainly do the skill set with us, and have those units credited through and get the diploma elsewhere. But we just don't feel like those types of units, manage human resources services, they're just not payroll. It's not our specific core fees. So if you wanted to go down that path and do the skill set first with us and then complete the diploma somewhere else and having those units credited, you could certainly do that.
All right, terrific. Sonya, got any thoughts on the units themselves, the competency units?
I do, KD. I think if somebody's going to do the skill set, I think that's fantastic. They're doing it because they're choosing to do so, and they most likely will want the learning outcome. So Tracy is right there, and I totally agree with that. If it's somebody new to payroll that's looking to get into the industry as a payroll service provider, or particularly as a BAS agent, you could incorporate the BAS skill set units as the electives, and they're really useful. And they have a dual purpose. You can obviously get your BAS agent registration with those. A great learning curve, ties in really, really well with payroll. I think the unit content is quite good. I'm quite happy with the content, to be honest. I think we'll probably concentrate on delivering the 5 core units in the skill set as well. I just see that that's a more important program for bookkeepers to complete rather than the full diploma. It depends on their purpose and what their plans are, whether they want to work as an employee, whether they want to be a payroll provider, whether they want to be a BAS agent that excels in payroll. So it really depends on the individual, and we'll chat to our prospective students to determine what their best course of action is.
Yep. Okay. So by the sounds of it, sort of, both organisations will be probably concentrating more on that skill set as opposed to the full diploma. So, all right, time's starting to get away from us, so we might start to look at some listener Q&As. But before we just go there,
can we do one of your polls?
I'm glad you asked.
Okay. Have you got any prepared?
All right. So obviously, both our ladies who are our special guests tonight have some serious payroll qualifications under their belt. So if you would like to hear a little bit more directly from them, then just please answer that poll there, and then we can get you directly in touch with the ladies, and they might like to send you a little bit of information about particular courses that they have on offer. So we'll just give that another little
So while that's
second
going,
or two.
have we got any other?
There's some
I've got a
Q&As
heap
here.
of Q&As here. They all look very complicated
They
too.
do, don't they?
I didn't even understand the question, let alone the answer.
All right, so we'll just finish up there. So, yep, terrific. Hold it closed. No, we don't want to do that. All right.
There's one there from Jean, just talking about the outsourced payroll providers. Surely they should be a registered BAS agent if they're numbers that go on the BAS. Yes, they are, and they are going to be registered as a BAS agent, but they're not completing an entire BAS. Their registration doesn't entitle them to go anywhere near GST and the other BAS services, TPARs and what have you. Their registration extends to two BAS provisions that they are most influenced by doing payroll, being super guarantee and pay as you go withholding. So they may, I think they could technically complete a pay as an instalment activity statement, but they couldn't complete a full BAS that had GST elements to it. There's a couple there about recent developments, and I think I saw this one go through the other day about where you've got employers that work more than the standard 38-hour week, and there was a recent case or pronouncement that their personal leave should be based on these extended hours, not just the standard hours, which is the current thinking or interpretation. And there was another one about people, it was a case, I think Sonya, you might have sent me a copy, or Tracy, I think we touched base with it, about when does a casual become a permanent part-timer, and it narrowed the definition a little bit. I think there was a case that went through, I think it wasn't Watpac, it was started with W, but it was something like that. And then I guess their cases in point as to why this is a evolving sort of landscape. I might just, what's the question out of that? I don't know.
We've got Ed on the line. So Ed,
Ed.
I'm just going to promote you to the panel for a minute, Ed. I see you've got a question for Tracy with your hand up there. So I'm just going to promote you. I shall unmute you. There we go. Ed, you should be on the line now. You've got a question for Tracy, I believe.
Hope it's an easy one.
You there, Ed? Hello? Ed, can you hear us? No, we might move on.
Ed's question was, why is his microphone not working?
All right.
I don't know, Ed.
There is a question there around recognised prior learning credits before commencing any of this. I've got Anita who's saying that she's been providing payroll quite an extensive level now for some time, but just wants that piece of paper. Where do they go to get some of that RPL recognised? Are you ladies aware?
It depends what qualification that your questioner requires. So it's best to have a look at, there's basically three. There's the Certificate for in Payroll Administration, the Diploma of Payroll Administration, and so they're our courses, and then there's this new Diploma of Payroll Services. It depends which one. And then you've just got to talk to the each RTO provider. Now, there's a difference between a credit transfer and RPL. So a credit transfer is when you've done this exact unit and you can have that credited, and you shouldn't be paying for that again. It's just credited towards the qualification, and RPL is just a different way of assessing. So we need to be careful not to mix up those two terminologies.
Yeah. Well, that sort of makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. But it's again, like I say, horses for courses. Talk to each RTO and find out what they have and what they recommend for each individual circumstance.
Question here from Cindy. It was around essentially she's a BAS agent and offers payroll services. Question around my PI as whether it would cover any problems that arise with payroll. This was something that we'd looked at in the past. Now, this one's going to be a little bit horses for courses. It gets down to the definition clauses that are contained in a person's PI policy. You would like to think that all PI policies have covered payroll services because it's such an integral part of what a BAS agent does. And it's to say 90% of our surveyed people, 89.8% do it. So you would think it's integral, but you can't make that assumption. I know with our two that it does. But if you're not using one of those two, you should grab your PI policy. You should look at the definition clauses, and we'll talk about what a bookkeeping service is and the services which you're indemnified for, and make sure that it gets a mention. If you aren't sure, contact broker and say, does this definition cover me doing payroll? You want to be absolutely specific on this one, because we found over the last little bit by speaking to our PI insurers, and they see very little activity on PI policies from bookkeepers, but payroll is an area where they are getting activity. So I would be advising you to absolutely go through your policy and ask whatever questions you need of your broker on that one.
All right. What else have we got here, mate?
There's a couple of questions about cost of the various qualifications, and I suspect the answer, if we throw it to Tracy and Sonya, is that it's going to vary depending on what the person wants. Do they want the skill set? Do they want the diploma? Are they going to be looking for I'll call them exemption, but whatever Tracy called them, or were they going to go down an RPL route? I think they're all going to have variations in there. But if either, and I think you guys, while you've in the various stages of having these things on scope, you may not even finish your final costing. So, but if you wanted to give any guidance, happy to hear it. Otherwise,
Pete, there's a little bit of indicative pricing floating around out there at the moment.
Yeah.
The diploma's sort of, from what I've seen, they're offering it at around 3.
Yeah.
The skill set at around 1,400.
Yeah.
This is other RTOs, Sonya, or this is your RTO?
No, not ours, Tracy,
Yeah.
and obviously not yours.
No, because what I was going to say is I've seen some of that pricing. I've seen the diploma actually as low as $2,000. I can assure you that you just can't provide quality content, training, and assessment for that.
I agree. I totally agree.
So
yeah, I think this is one you can't skimp on this one. If you're a BAS agent and you're doing this because you choose to do it, you're not doing it because you have to get a piece of paper. You're doing it because you choose to upskill and get that knowledge. You don't want a qualification that cuts any corners with the learning just to give yourself that piece of paper, which means nothing. You want the learning because that means something. That might protect your house. I think this is one you don't skimp. You don't rate it based on cost. It's got to be quality of learning.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a couple that have got pricing on their website, and both of them are remarkably cheap, and I have no idea how you can provide it for that cost at all.
Yeah.
In terms of catering to regional and rural areas, we've got a couple of questions coming through about where can regional and rural people start to obtain some of this material. Sonya?
Online, KD.
Online. Yep.
Best place to go.
Yep.
As long as they've got internet, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good point. A lot of rural people asking about STP and not having NBN in their area and how they're going to live. So it's not always a certainty they've got internet connections or reliable ones.
I think it's too early it's certainly too early to know if there's any classroom-based training out there. Tracy, are you online?
I haven't seen any. We tend not to do it either because Australia is just too big and to cater for everyone, it just has to be online content. Having said that, again, what's really important when you're choosing your payroll qualification provider is most of us will go down the online route just because of how big Australia is, and actually globally, we've got clients that do this globally. Really important to understand though what support that you get when you enroll in these qualifications. So, for example, at Australian Payroll Institute, it's all the content and the assessments are delivered through our online platform, but you have access in business hours to all our trainers, and they're all people that have actually run payrolls and large payrolls themselves, and you have access to them either through our learning portal, by email, or by telephone. You can just always pick up the phone to someone. So I think that's important, and that might be things like that are the differentiators between the cheap courses and the ones that are providing the high level of learning.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, a really quick question here, Tracy, because Kelvin's nudging me under the table because he does that sort of stuff. I think we're running out of time.
You'll be bashing you, sure.
One of our listeners is thinking about doing your payroll masterclass course. And the question was, I think the question is, how many CPE hours are included in the masterclass?
Yeah, it's 8. It's an 8-hour program.
Yeah, okay. Look, there's still plenty of questions we're not going to get to. What we might do is, because we're pretty well ducko for time, is we might compile any of those that are good and replicable. We've got a number of ways we can get those out there, even if it's a subsequent email to anyone that's tuned in. So we'll filter those that we didn't get to, and we can get answers. We may have to come back to either Tracy or Sonya to fill it in, because we're not as smart as them on payroll. Not as smart as them full stop, I suppose.
Right.
And we'll see what answers we can get out. But I think we're nearly...
Yeah, mate, we're at time. So, look, thanks everyone for joining us tonight after a little bit of a break. Of course, we'd like to thank our special guest tonight, Tracy Angwin from the Australian Payroll Association, and of course Sonya Farawell from Group 314. So, thank you both very much, ladies, for your time this evening, and of course sharing insight into this new qualification and skill set. Mate, that's it for another Bookkeeper Radio.
You mentioned 52 sleeps until ABN conference.
Exactly,
52 sleeps.
Yeah, it's not far away now. We've actually got less than 10 tickets left now to get to that conference, and I think we don't even have that much by way of rooms available anymore.
There's 6 tents we've bought, so you can sleep on the lawn at Nara if you want.
Cuddle a dolphin. So yeah, look, if you'd like to get to the ABN conference, then now's your last opportunity to do so. Not long to go to that. But ladies, thanks again for your time this evening. We'll be back for another Bookkeeper Radio episode on the 12th of September, where Pete mentioned earlier Ian Taylor from the Tax Practitioners Board, together with Sonya Farawell from Group 314, who was on there tonight, will be joining us for an in-depth discussion around CPE, and where we get to ask, I guess, Ian an opportunity around this payroll qualification, although he did actually answer it there before on chat line. So that was great to see.
And that one would have to be qualifying CPE in itself.
It would.
We'll ask him that when he's on. I'm sure you'll bless it.
All right. Thanks very much for your time,
Thank you,
folks, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 12th. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.